Okay, hey everyone. I'm joined here by none other than the incredible Mr. Steve Vai. It is such an honor, Steve. How you doing?
I'm doing great. Thanks so much, Casey.
That's great. So what I would love to do is talk to you. I mean, you've got such a storied career. Is talk to you about some of the past, but then get on to talking about the new record, Inviolate, which uh, which drops on January 28 on CD and digital, and for those who prefer vinyl, it is March 18. So we'll get to that. But the first thing, there's a couple of questions that I want to ask you that may only interest me, but I've always wanted to ask them, and this is my this is my opportunity, right? Um, the first one is about 10, maybe 12 years ago. I went to one of your Alien Guitar Secrets clinics in Melbourne, Australia, and something really interesting happened. So we're in a theater of about 600 guitarists, and you launch into the first song, and obviously you play a floating tremolo, which for those at home, if they don't know, if you break a string, the whole guitar goes out of tune. And what happened? You broke a string, and we could all see it, all because the string kind of flies off, and you hear a collective gasp. Because we're all thinking the same thing. What's he going to do? And what you did, at least as I perceived it, I mean, it sounded perfect. You used the trem, the whammy bar, to keep the notes in tune. Do you have any recollection of this? Because that blew my mind. That, honestly, as a guitarist, that killed me.
Well, I might assume that if you had a tape of it and you listened to it, it might not be as spot on as you recollect.
No, well, maybe. I'd actually wondered if it was like a, almost a
Well,
gimmick, like you'd practiced that.
no, but
Okay.
I've been in happened to me enough times where you learn how to navigate these.
I would
And
imagine, yeah.
a lot of the actions that I take in a situation like that are based on a lot of things that I can only know at the time the string breaks. So if
Yeah.
it's like the middle of a song, uh, I'm not going to try to play through the song with a broken string.
Yeah.
So I've done various things. One is just stop everything and change and start over.
Yeah.
Another is uh, stop everything and go to the next song. Another thing is uh, navigate the song by finding the right notes. And what I probably did then was grab a string
Mhm.
that I knew, because one string will be in some kind of tune. And then if I bring the bar to a particular point, I can play normally on the string and the notes will come out in tune. It's hard because it's a
Yeah.
crapshoot. You got to
Yeah.
control,
Yeah.
you know. And then if I go to another string, I have to readjust the bar.
And this is why I was so blown away. But that was
What I usually do is I find notes that work. I play those with one hand while I switch guitars. And then
yeah.
Thomas will just unplug one guitar and plug the other one in, and I'm off.
Wow. Yeah. That's so cool. Well,
Any means necessary, Casey.
any means necessary. The show must go on, right?
Let's go on. The
It's
strings will break, but I got to tell you,
yeah.
since I've been using these Ernie Ball Cobalt strings,
Yeah.
they just don't break.
They're cool. I have used those. And
I mean, they'll break, but it's rare.
yeah. Uh, well, like I have like almost a similar question about this is another geek question, but I've got to get them out of the way before we move on to the really important stuff. Uh, One of my favorite records of all time, and I'm not just saying this because I'm speaking to you, is Skyscraper, David Lee Roth. Uh, I think it is tremendously underrated. It's killer, but
Very musical record. Yeah.
oh yeah, yeah, and it has a how do I put it? It's quite majestic at times, yet it has a sense of humor running through it. There's little musical things that are almost a nod to musicians, like, hey, check this out, you know, and whoa. But it was, it had a lot of pop as well. But there's one moment on that record that since I heard it when I was maybe 16, 17, that I've always been really confused about, and it is in the solo for Hot Dog and a Shake. I don't know if you know the bit that I'm talking about, if anyone's ever asked you about this before. If you even recall that solo, you've played a lot of solos in your life, but there is a moment where you're really shredding, and then it just kind of like dips. Yeah, and it's kind of it stops, and then it picks up again. Do you recall, was that an accident? Was that planned? Because it seems so perfect.
Yeah. No, that I knew I was going to do that. The
Okay.
idea behind it was to create a flurry of notes and then leave space, because in the space, that's the time where you recognize the flurry of notes.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So it's like, and there's like a little break, and it's almost like, where did that come from? And then bam, it comes back in. And I never hear that. And I thought, okay, if I never heard it, it's got my name on it.
Exactly. That's such a cool effect. And I've even read reviews of the album where they reference that as if it's a mistake. And I've always just known, listening to it, like, no, that's not, no. That solo's too good. That's not a mistake.
The rest, I can assure you that nothing gets on anything that I record that I might consider to be a mistake.
I wouldn't think so. Yeah.
Others, that's fine.
Well, as I said, that bit for me is one of, like, almost defines the album, in that it's so perfect that it's just this one little piece. But that can be what defines a solo, is one note.
Yeah, it certainly can. There's one solo on Eat 'Em and Smile that, for me, and it's just a few notes, and it's a Big Trouble solo.
Oh yeah.
It's just these notes that I play up top when it goes round, round, and round. It's so Vai. I wonder if people will get that. And some did.
Yeah, I did. Just believe me, that's another killer record. But so I've got a couple of friends who actually wanted me to ask about a period of your career that, yeah, you probably don't reference so often, and that being two projects. One of them, Bad for Good.
I knew you were going to say that.
Is that a bad thing?
I'm very proud of the record. It's one of the better records that I ever made.
And well, what was the I suppose the impetus? Were those songs purpose written for that, or were they repurposed songs that you kind of had? Because that was really like almost like a mentorship, would you call it, in the group that was put together?
Yeah, I had met young Thomas McLaughlin, and I was impressed with the way he plays. And the idea from Interscope at the time, and something that I wanted to do, that I brought to them basically, was, well, I didn't bring it to them. Somehow it got to them, but I was involved, and they were on the radar, and they picked it up. It was to create a record performed by almost prepubescent kids that sounded huge, musical, and something that they could play. So I knew no matter what happened, I wasn't going to play anything on the record. And that record took a year.
Yeah.
And I worked, the whole band, we had a great time. It was a lot of fun. It was one of the more fun projects I ever did, because they were kids and they were doing all sorts of outlandish things, And we made yeah, we made a really great. If you listen to that Bad for Good record, the vocals, the guitar, everything, I'm really happy with that record. But right when it was released, the label was getting behind it. But as we were making it, the whole scene was changing. It was going from rock music to more grunge-like.
Yeah.
So that record didn't really it was too late, so to speak.
And I think a lot of great records at that time suffered the same fate. That was just and it's a shame. But the cool thing is, there's a lot of hidden gems out there for people to go back and find.
That's a great record. I listened to it probably about 5 years ago, and I'm wow, so melodic, and so rock and roll, and so captured that youthful feel.
Yeah,
And those guys, so much fun. Oh my god.
that's awesome. And the next one, you know, if we're talking that era, is Sex and Religion. That was a project that really only lasted, well, it lasted one record and one tour. You know, what was there ever any push or desire to do another one with that lineup, or was that just one and done?
Well, I have done more work with people that were in that lineup. I mean, Devin and I do. We share files occasionally, and
Yeah,
contribute to each other's projects. And Terry just played on Inviolate.
that's
So
right. Yeah.
no, I don't have any intention to continue with a conventional style rock band. I enjoyed doing that project. It was a challenge, um, but I thought we made a great record. It was different than what people were expecting.
Mm.
But after that, I realized that I wanted to create a body of work that was relatively undiluted by anybody else's contribution. And when I say that, I don't mean strictly. I co-write occasionally, and I have other people. Obviously, I work with a lot of different people. But as far as the creative process and the notes that end up getting on the song, it just has to be my.
Yeah. No, that makes complete sense. And uh, well, to that end, the new record. It's been a few years since you've put one out, and obviously, you know, we're in interesting times. But let's talk about that. Do you perhaps feel, you know, obviously as someone who's done as much as you have, and with the reputation that you have, when you put out a record, is there any pressure for you to, you know, be Steve Vai? That, you know, the Steve Vai that everyone expects.
It's a good question, and it's a question that a lot of artists kind of ask themselves, because as you navigate through your career, there's various external influences that can contradict your sense of what's right for you.
Yeah.
So I noticed that for me, when I started really engaging in my solo work, the music scene was changing. It's changed several times, a whole bunch of times since I started. I've been doing this for 42 years. And there was various ways that I handled that psychologically through my career. There was, like any artist that's passionate about what they do, if somebody doesn't like it, it's kind of like a little dagger, you
Of
know.
course. Yeah.
That's the way that used to be the case for me, and especially in the period when grunge had arrived, and I kind of represented everything that was wrong about playing the guitar. And it was a period that I went through where I was being highly criticized in the press, all this kind of thing. And I'd sit there and I go, "Why don't people like me? Why don't people?" And that, but what I noticed was it didn't deter my creative instincts. I couldn't sabotage them because they were too strong. They said, "You're going to do Freak Show Excess now. You're going to do this song now," because the idea for a song would become very compelling, and it would trump the fear of not fitting in or something. And that has served me really well, because
I'd say so.
my
Yeah.
record my records are um, very much ingrained with my DNA, my musical DNA, and that's the way it should be. You know, for people who are compelled to be creative like that. So when it came time to do Inviolate, none of those things, none of those psychological barriers existed the way they used to. Because look, I'm 61. I've done it. I understand now that the most important thing is to express your creative impulses in a joyous way. So when an idea would come that was compelling, I knew that I had the freedom to execute it. And that's all over in Violet, you know?
Yeah, well, yeah, you can say that again, and it starts out with, and I sort of found this. I heard the song before I actually found out the backstory, but about the guitar, if you can call it a guitar, involved, Teeth of the Hydra. That's almost like something that we'd weirdly expect from you, whether it's the David Lee Roth era double neck or, a
Yep.
seven string. It's like, how are we going to push the instrument? Whether you were the first, as I understand, the first guy to reroute the Floyd so you could pull up on it. You've always pushed the guitar further and further. And so to hear about that one, and for people who don't know, maybe you could tell them about the instrument involved in that song.
Yeah. The Hydra.
Yeah, the
Um,
Hydra.
yeah. Now, 5 years ago, I had a desire I like multi-neck guitars, and I've
Mhm.
had them in the past, as mentioned, but I never really feel like I integrated those guitars into a piece of music in a very powerful way. So I wanted to create this guitar that had three necks and harp strings. And I could see in my mind's eye what I wanted to do. So I knew I wanted a bass neck. I wanted this guitar to be the only thing in the performance,
Mhm.
and with the exception of drums and keyboards. So I knew I wanted a 7 string neck and a 12 string neck. It was half fretless. I wanted the bass neck to be half fretless. It's a 3/4 inch bass neck. And I wanted harp strings. And I just envisioned how I would navigate this song. I didn't know what the song was going to be, but I knew. I knew what it was. I kind of knew what it was going to be, but I didn't know the particulars. So it took about 4 or 5 years to build that guitar because we kept going back and forth. And I was into steampunk uh, stuff at the time. So I sent them a bunch of examples of that. And Hoshino, the guys in Japan for Ibanez, did a rendering of the Hydra. And I saw it and I just couldn't believe it. And I said, "You going to build this?" And he said, "Yup." And they just started building it. And finally, I received it. And I couldn't believe it when I saw it. It was both awesome and terrifying, because I knew
It looks terrifying.
yeah, I knew I had to write a piece of music with it. And I just sat, it stood on a stand in the studio for about a year and a half, and I'd see it, 30 times a day. And every time I passed it, it would like beckon me, "Oh, Vi, you have to hit me one of these days. Come on." So then one day I carved out 6 weeks and I just started to figure it out. And I knew that first and foremost, the song needed to stand on its own as a piece of music and not as a gimmick for a guitar. And I also knew that it had to have a great melody. So I did my best to write the melody that I thought was appropriate for that guitar and the song. And I love the way it came out. And then I just had to figure out how to navigate it seamlessly. So when you listen to the song Teeth of the Hydra, all the bass, 7 string, 12 string, and harp strings are all performed in one performance on the Hydra.
That's incredible. And as I said, I had no idea that there was anything kind of kind of funky going on about that particular guitar until I had already heard the song and then listened back in. And sorry, then read the depressor on it.
Yeah. Last night I was practicing the chorus a bit. Anyway, you get the idea.
Wow, that's so cool. So that guitar's going out on the tour?
I certainly hope so.
Oh man, that's going to be something to
I have to
see.
figure out how to, I mean, I have to stand up and play it, and there's still a lot of stuff I have to navigate. And it's a very delicate instrument. It's highly technical. It's got a whole synthesizer section. It has piezo's and sustainers, and it's sample and hold stuff. It's really a marvel. So I'm just making friends with it.
Yeah.
It bites.
Oh, it's a rough sport. Another great one on there is, and there was a cool.
But it's my bitch.
Another one that I loved was Knapsack. Now, was that written with one hand? There's a video out there, obviously, of you doing it with one hand.
No, it was written with my brain.
Yeah. I got to watch the way I phrase these questions. But yeah, there's that cool. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I had I was in lockdown like everybody else, and I just started experimenting with some things that I always wanted to do, and one of them was create a solo acoustic vocal record. And I got pretty far into that, and then towards the end, I really had to get work done on my shoulder because for about 2 years it was getting worse and worse, and I had torn ligaments, and I got that all fixed. And when I had gotten out of the surgery, I was wearing the doctor that did the surgery his name was Dr. Knapp, and he created this particular type of a sling for people that had this kind of shoulder surgery, and he called it the Knapsack. So I thought, here's the name for my song. So I just was kind of, I had just gotten out of the hospital, and I was in the studio, and I received my new Black Onyx Pia. And the moment I put my hands on it and started going like this, first I realized I can't play. I got one hand, and then that lasted about 1 second. And I said, oh, yes, I can. And you know what? My song with one hand. So the whole, just like that, boom, there was the DNA for the entire song was in the one idea. I didn't know what the song was going to be, but I knew that it had to stand on its own as a piece of music and not be a gimmick. And I knew it needed a great melody. So that was the first thing I wrote. I actually wrote the melody down. And I was all alone because we were in lockdown and nobody was in the studio. So I had to do everything. I set up the amp, set up the mics, set up the video, set up the session, record it, engineer it, all with one hand. And, and perform it, and it worked great.
Again, it's another great example of, I listened to the record first and then found out the story later. Although I had seen the video, I suppose, but yeah, you wouldn't. It's not something where you listen to it and you go, "Oh, here's a guy playing with one hand." No, it's just a brilliant piece of music, and that's the cool thing about. I feel like, and obviously we can't do this, but I feel like you almost run through this record song by song and get all the cool stories. Like Candle Power. You came up with a new technique, and that's tough, man, because there's not too many. I feel like to come up with, anymore.
Well, other people said it was a new technique.
Okay.
But I never saw it before. I assume it existed, but it was a unique idea for me, and the way that I do it, I knew it wasn't going to be reminiscent of anything that might have been done, because I can't do that stuff. Like, for instance, stretching a note and playing other notes while you're stretching a note is not unique. It's very common in country music.
Extremely, yeah.
Stretching two notes at the same time in different directions and then playing, that's not common. That's very uncommon. And there's only a small handful of people that I've ever saw do it. And I only saw them do it after I released Candle Power, and people were saying, "Oh, this guy was doing it, and this guy." So I said, "Oh, okay, there it is." You know, so the one guy, Jerry Donahue, incredible guitar player, country player.
Yeah, he
He's
was
a
from
master
the what were they called? The Helicasters?
Telecasters.
Yeah.
So I didn't really know about him until I had recorded Candle Power, and people said, "Oh, that sounds like Jerry Donahue." So I said, "Well, let me check it out." And I'd seen him do some stuff that was similar in a sense, but the way I'm doing it, it doesn't have the kind of control that a country player might have. It's different, you know. So the reason why I did it was because I instinctually knew it was going to sound really interesting, because I could hear it in my mind. And there's only two passages that I was doing it because it was tremendously difficult to do.
Yeah.
The way I'm doing it, it really was, it's the first of its kind. Sorry, there it is. I have, or if it's not, I haven't seen it. But that doesn't matter. You know, everything anybody plays is the first of its kind in one sense.
Well,
You know?
yeah, I feel like that's a lot like Eddie with tapping. You know, did he invent it? People say, "Oh, Eddie didn't invent tapping." Well, he sort of did, in that he'd never seen it before. So, you know, I mean, it's not like we're patenting these things.
You know, if Eddie Van Halen saw somebody go beep, 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 you know, that's not eruption.
No.
What he was a paradigm shift. He refined it to a very high level.
And just to quickly, again, this is one of my questions I would just personally love, just to take a very, very brief detour on the topic of Eddie. I mean, he's my personal guitar hero, and
Direct.
yeah, and it's, you know, it was, losing him was brutal. That was like losing a family member. But one of the questions that was probably a lot of people would have had about Ed was, and I know that you knew him, G3. I know you guys tried to make it happen. Did you ever get close to getting him to do it?
Nope.
He just wouldn't do it. Oh man, because that would have been something.
I'm sure Joe reached out to him, but Edward comes from a line of thinking that your band is what you do.
Yeah.
And his brother reinforced that in him. So it was extremely rare to see Edward go out and do things. I mean, from what I understand, when he did the Beat It solo, he snuck out and did it behind everybody's back, thinking, you know, nothing will really happen with this. You know? Guys.
Funny how that worked out. Yeah. Number one record and whatnot. Yeah.
So for Edward to do G3, I don't think there's not a lot of. It sounds good on paper, but in reality, what is he going to do? Go out there and play Van Halen songs? I guess he could, but it would be so unlike him to do something like that. Now, I'll tell you an interesting story. I was at Edward's house once in the studio, and he was playing me tons of. He's got like a vault just filled with his sitting and playing, and it's miraculous. I mean, there's stuff in there, and we're listening, and I'm going, "What are you doing? We got to release. What? You can't put this in the vault, you know." And he agreed, but he said, you know, he's not a solo instrumental kind of a guy. So he always felt that all of his songs were instrumental, and they happened to have vocals.
Yeah.
He wouldn't have been. It would have been great, but he was just not that kind of guy.
Yeah, that's too bad. But obviously, we're all we're all richer for having heard his music, especially as guitarists.
He added to the quality of all of our lives.
He sure did. But so you, as I understand it, are embarking on a pretty significant tour in support of Inviolate.
Yeah.
Is
When
that
is your when is your interview airing?
that'll be at the end of this month, so it'll be right around the time the record comes out.
Well, then you'll find out that on Monday I have to make the announcement uh, that we're pushing the tour. The
COVID,
first leg,
is that, yeah, COVID thing?
the shoulder.
Oh, the shoulder. Oh, okay.
Yeah, I retore a tendon over the summer, and I thought I'd be able to get away with it, but no way. I have to get it fixed because this tour is like going to be like a year and a half. I'm going
Yeah.
up. And we built it modularly, so just in the event that something happened, we could, because that's what's going on right now in the world. Bands are moving stuff all over the place.
Yep.
So right now on the books, I'm kicking off in Europe in the summer, and then I'll be doing the American leg, and then the rest of the world, hopefully.
Well, hopefully that leaves hope for Australia. Yeah.
Oh, absolutely.
Oh
I'm
yeah.
looking at. Yeah, no, I'll say it now, but things constantly change. I'm looking at Africa and Australia in probably this winter. Not. I'm sorry, next winter, 22. But
Yeah.
it's hard to say.
And especially at the moment. And so, I guess, I mean, you've been so generous with your time. I would probably love to just end with one question, and I know that you're a from that guitar clinic that I went to. You know, you're a thinker, and what I got out of it, probably more so than guitar stuff, which I got heaps. As a guitar teacher, it blew my mind. But just some of the life advice and the philosophical stuff was that really was what I took from it. And the question I guess I would ask you is, at the end of it all, when, you know, maybe 100 years from now, what does Steve Vai want his legacy to be?
In 100 years from now, Steve Vai is not going to be concerned about his legacy.
That's a great. Okay, Steve Vai today. What does he want his legacy to be in 100 years?
I don't think about it because
Okay.
it doesn't matter. What I mean, it would be very nice if in the future there were people who found my catalog and found some enjoyment in it. You know, my work, my name is going to be dust and completely forgotten, along with everything you know now, including the Rolling Stones to Jesus Christ, because the universe and the planet can hold its breath for 1 billion years, and all of what we believe is important is probably relatively important. But here's the thing: there isn't an action. Well, I should say this: there isn't a thought or an action that you can take that doesn't somehow affect all that is. So, although what you believe your legacy will be, that doesn't matter. What matters is your contribution. And if your contribution has joy in it or suffering, that's what's important. And whatever you do affects the whole. Your name is unimportant, and that's all there is to it.
Wow. Like I said, I love that philosophy.
This goes for everybody, by the way. Nobody is more important or special than anybody else. This is just the truth. And it doesn't look that way from our perspective. From our perspective, certain things look more important or valuable than others. But in reality, you can't quantify the effect. You cannot quantify the cooperative components that were necessary for all those things that you believe are more important than anything else. It's hard to explain. What I mean by that is
I
everything
understand.
is connected, and you can't. I can't make a record without everybody that ever lived. But without their contribution, somehow it touches you. Here's an analogy, and analogies are just that, analogies. If I go to the ocean and I prick my finger and I put one drop of my blood in that ocean, at some point that drop of blood will become part of the entire universe. I don't, because everything's constantly changing, so our whole perspective of the importance of our contribution and our legacy is a wank. It's not our egoic perspective of our legacy is a fantasy in comparison to what's actually going on. I don't know where
Wow.
these things come from, but there it is.
Man, that was an incredible answer. Super cool. Well, I should
I
probably
mean, for me to say I want to be remembered forever.
I
That's immortality. I'm already immortal. We all are. Anyway, okay.
I think you'll be I think we'll yeah you'll be fondly remembered. But and this record will play a part in that. It's a really awesome addition to your catalog. Seriously, and I'm not just saying that because we're speaking right now. I've really enjoyed listening to it.
Thank
And
you. And that's all I'm here to do, is to give you something to enjoy. I love being a service provider. I love, I just love what I do. I
it
really
shows.
enjoy, yeah, I enjoy the creative process of what I do. I enjoy the performance. I enjoy knowing that there's people that are finding value in it. That's really great. So that I'm living my legacy right now.
There you go. There you have it. Well, as I said earlier, the new album Inviolate is out January 28 on CD and digital. I highly recommend everyone give it a listen if you're a Steve Vai fan, or if you're not, because it's a pretty good way to become one. And I just want to thank you again for being so generous with your time and your answers. It has been such a pleasure and a little bit of living a dream for me, if I can just be honest about that. So, Steve, once again, thank you so much, and I can't wait to see you tour down here. That's going to be something special. And bring that Hydra guitar.
Got it, Casey. Thank you so much for the interview and for all that you're doing here.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. You take care.
Okay, bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.